right, team, welcome. It is that time once again, another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. And as always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again. And today we're going to be delving into the topic of knowing yourself and why that is really such an important thing, not only in leadership really, but everywhere. Just as a person, it's good to have a firm understanding of yourself. But particularly in leadership, because when we're on the pedestal, we are subject to a set of pressures that others are unaccustomed to. And the thing about leadership is that it will very, very quickly reveal to you your strengths and your weaknesses from a personality and an emotional perspective, because you'll be put in all sorts of situations that are nuanced and require self-control and considered judgment as to how you respond. And if you don't know yourself, if you don't know your personality traits, what you respond to, what you don't, you will be hard pressed to execute your leadership role well. There is a real benefit to being introspective enough as a leader to understand where you are strong, understand where you're weak, and understand where you lay somewhere in between. This concept does relate back to an earlier episode where we talked about knowing your enemy and what that enemy might represent. You know, it could be a personality trait that on the surface appears to be a great strength, but the flip side is a negative. Okay, so we've addressed ways in previous episodes how not knowing yourself and your personality could potentially be a threat and impede your ability to do your leadership role well. But what we'll do is we'll get into a little excerpt from recent history, this time involving a company called Yahoo, and this will help set the scene as to why it's particularly important to know yourself and why doing so might enable you to pivot and find success in a leadership role. Here we go. In 2012, Marissa Mayer took the helm at Yahoo, a company in turmoil. After years of stagnation and internal disarray, Yahoo was struggling to regain its footing in the rapidly changing tech landscape. The company's culture was fractured, marked by silos and a lack of coordination between teams. Employees were often working in isolation and morale was low. Yahoo needed a strong leader to navigate its challenges and unite the fractured company. Mayer, a former Google executive, was known for her high standards, attention to detail, and her results-driven approach. She was direct, assertive, and had a competitive nature, qualities that had served her well at Google. But as she entered Yahoo's troubled environment, she quickly realized that her approach might not resonate with the employees she now led. What had worked at Google, where collaboration was at the heart of the company's culture, didn't immediately translate to Yahoo, where deep-rooted tensions and fragmentation were more prevalent. The first weeks at Yahoo were filled with challenges. Mayer could feel the distance between her leadership style and the employees who were looking for a leader who could rebuild trust and collaboration. Her directness, while effective in her previous role, was sometimes seen as cold and distant at Yahoo, where employees were longing for empathy and openness. At times, her assertive push for results came off as overbearing, only exacerbating existing conflicts within the company. Mayer quickly recognized the need to adapt. She understood the company's internal struggles weren't just about strategy, they were about the people, the culture, and the trust that had eroded over time. She knew that in order to heal the fractures at Yahoo, she would have to work through the very traits that had made her successful in her career so far. Her competitive, results-oriented nature could easily be seen as a source of tension. So she needed to find a balance between pushing for progress and listening to her employees' concerns. One of her first steps was to change Yahoo's communication approach. She initiated weekly all-hands meetings where employees from all levels could openly share their thoughts and their concerns. This move was a direct effort to break down the silos that had kept teams apart for so long. By opening up the communication channels, Mayer began to rebuild transparency and trust within the company. Mayer also introduced a sense of urgency to the organisation. Yahoo had been stagnating for many years, and Mayer knew that change needed to happen quickly. So she pushed for rapid decision-making, emphasising the importance of action in order to regain momentum. However, she also made sure that employees felt heard. When she made the difficult decision to end Yahoo's remote working policy, something that stirred up considerable backlash, she took the time to explain her rationale for the decision. She didn't shy away from the discomfort that the decision had caused, but framed it as a necessary step towards fostering a more cohesive and collaborative company culture. Throughout this process, Maya realised that her initial approach needed to be tempered with empathy. She worked to be more approachable, actively engaging with employees in informal settings, and encouraging honest and open conversations. By doing so, she began to break down the walls that had separated leadership from the rest of the company. Employees started to feel more connected, not only to her vision, but also to one another. Despite a relatively short tenure as CEO, stepping down in 2017, after Yahoo was acquired by Verizon, Maya's leadership marked a turning point for the company. Her ability to recognise that her own personality traits, her directness, her competitiveness, and her desire for results needed to be balanced with empathy and collaboration, helped her guide Yahoo through one of the most turbulent periods in the company's existence. In the end, Maya's success lay not just in her strategic decisions, but in her willingness to recognise and adapt to her own limitations. By adjusting her leadership style to better manage conflicts, promote communication, and build trust, she laid the groundwork for Yahoo's eventual recovery, even in the face of challenges. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that great leaders must not only be aware of the issues they face, but also understand how their own personal traits can shape their responses and how to work around them for the benefit of the team and the organisation as a whole. And the reason I wanted to share that excerpt with all of you today is because it's a beautiful illustration of how someone, a very accomplished leader, obviously, someone who's used to getting good results, comes into a new organisation using the approach that has served her well. She receives feedback, right? She's introspective enough and emotionally intelligent enough to observe and receive feedback from the workforce. And she's stepped back and gone, right, this approach isn't working. I've got to pivot, recognise where perhaps I'm being perceived in a way that I'm not intending to, and I've got to calibrate it and tweak it until I get the right mix. And it's not about saying, well, you're direct and you're assertive and that's a bad thing. No, sometimes it's a good thing in certain situations. It's about recognising that in this particular situation, maybe this isn't the right mix. Maybe I'm going to reach into the toolbox and pull out another tool to use for this particular scenario. See one of our previous episodes on situational leadership, really crucial leadership theory that I will come back to over and over and over again because it is just in everything. All right, there are tools for the job, different approaches for different scenarios. What a great example. So it really does help to know yourself. She couldn't have got those results that she got if she wasn't introspective and she wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to A, read other people, but B, understand how she was being perceived. And this is a really crucial thing that we should all aspire to. I mentioned that leadership is nuanced. It's actually one of the most nuanced things you will ever do because no two people are the same. No two situations are precisely the same. It means that as a leader, you've got to be agile. You've got to have that toolbox ready to go. You've got to have that radar finely tuned, reading the energy, right, of the workforce so that you can get ahead of challenges and respond accordingly. And one of the key aspects of being able to do this is to know yourself really, really well. So what personality traits are you working with? Are you a naturally confrontational person? Are you, on the other end of the spectrum, a bit too agreeable? Maybe you're a little introverted. Maybe the idea of doing what that excerpt highlighted there by getting everybody together and doing big team toolboxes and speaking at them, maybe that scares you to no end. So when you understand what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and everybody has a unique personality profile and makeup, you can then find yourself in a better position to understand how to maximize the potential that you have by either reshaping some of those personality aspects or perhaps learning to channel them into the right situations and scenarios. And I want to get you guys thinking. One of the keys to good leadership is being introspective. So I want to prompt some thought here. I want you to have a think about yourself. Is there a trait that you have that prevents you from leading effectively in certain areas? Think about the things that you will be required to deal with as a leader or supervisor, and ideally you will have a bit of an idea as to what they'll be because you should have worked under a leader and seen what they've had to deal with. So put yourself in their shoes and have a think about whether there's a trait that you think you have, a tendency that you have that might prevent you from leading effectively and giving your employees what they need. It's time well spent. It's really worth it. Have a look at your personality from an overview perspective. Ask yourself questions. Am I naturally agreeable? What positions and situations might that be a great strength? But what's the negative of it? Great strengths often have flip sides. You might say, well, I'm very agreeable, so I'm friendly and I can pretty much talk with anybody and I'm a likable person. Okay, that's awesome. But if you're very agreeable, you might find that conflict is your arch nemesis. I can speak to this personally because I'm actually naturally quite an agreeable guy. I'm friendly. I don't particularly like conflict. And I remember when I started to lead people for the first time, I realized very, very quickly that was a negative. Yeah, it's great. I'm agreeable. I can, meet all sorts of people and I'm friendly and I'm great with customers. I'm great to talk to. Friendly, fun to be around, good sense of humour. All the things that come with agreeable people. Great. But the flip side of that for me, and I suspect for you, if you have an agreeable personality, is that conflict is not really something that I'm thrilled to be dealing with. It feels like a chore. And I'm not suggesting we should be enjoying conflict, but I want everybody to be aware that it's a potential weak spot that you need to give focus to. Doesn't mean you have to enjoy it, but it needs to pop up on your radar as a potential weak spot so that you have the opportunity to put a plan and a strategy in place to deal with it. And how I did it was essentially understanding that nobody really loves conflict. It'd be concerning if you did. So there's something to just dwell on. But that my antithesis, my response to that discomfort of conflict was to attach my reasoning for voluntarily wading into that confrontational situation with a higher purpose. So let's explore that a little bit. Yes, it's unpleasant, but I'm doing it for a greater good. What do you mean by that? The people that I lead are relying on me to do this job well. And what does that look like? It means confrontation. It means, where appropriate, pulling people up on negative behaviours. So when you can frame it from a higher perspective aspect, and you can almost complement your tendency to be agreeable by framing it as something that you're actually doing for the benefit of the greater good, it might make it a little bit easier. It might be a slight shift in your mentality if you can frame it like that. It's still not going to be enjoyable, but at least you know that the reasons you're doing it are noble and it's for the greater good. And that might just give you that push you need. I'm also a believer that your personality traits aren't necessarily set. You can adjust where necessary. You can train these things. They're just behaviours at the end of the day. They're just neural pathways. Neuroplasticity is a thing. Emotional resilience is a thing. You can change neural pathways through experiences over time, and you can absolutely enhance your emotional response by doing new things successfully. So that's what I want you guys to focus on. Before you step into a leadership role for the first time, it's really ideal if you have a great understanding of yourself and if you're introspective. So have a think about that. Dwell on it. All right? And it will pay dividends. Guys, thanks so much for joining me for another episode. We've had some really fantastic responses in the last little bit. I've had people reaching out saying that they're really getting a lot from these episodes, and that is really the only reason that I do it. So I'm really pleased that this is acting as fuel for you guys. And please keep reaching out and letting me know if perhaps there's something that you want covered specifically. To do that, you can head to the show notes and use the Send Us a Text link. Type your question in, and that'll pop an email through to me, and perhaps I can address the topic on the show. I can give you a shout out if that's something that you would like, or you can remain completely anonymous. It's completely up to you. As always, whatever podcast app you get this show on, subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. They really do help. And just keep enjoying the show and keep applying the lessons that we're imparting here. And I'm confident that if you do that, you will be the very best leader you can be. But it does take effort. This is a higher calling. It is something that is not for everybody. And we need to understand that as we carry out this role, which is, by the way, a privilege. Leading people is a privilege. Guys, follow us on Instagram if you haven't already for other content such as reels and videos and things like that, and the LinkedIn Community of Practice page as well. It is called the Exceptional Leadership Community of Practice on LinkedIn. The links to both Instagram and LinkedIn are embedded in the show notes, so click through there if you want to get there nice and easily. But with all that said and all that done, guys, I will see you for the next one. Thanks for tuning in.